this session is focused in particular, as Tim was saying, on INFFs in small island development states, in SIDS. And well, basically what happens is, well, we all know that SIDS are in a particular situation and face particular challenges given the peculiarities around their situation and the unique vulnerabilities. So from a financial and economic perspective, SIDS well, face significant challenges like having a narrow resource-based and undiversified economies, a small private sector, limited capacities, high-cost transport, communications and energy, remoteness from markets and strong dependence on trade, travel and remittances, high sensitivity to international fluctuations and narrow trade partners, lack of access to concessional finance and debt sustainability issues, just to mention a few of those challenges. And of course, those challenges posed significant stress when it comes to financing sustainable development. So because of that, well, they have been prioritized in the UN agenda and in the agenda of the development partners. And well, in UNDESA, or UNDESA led a work of the interagency task force for producing guidance, a specific guidance on INFFs in SIDS. And we are here to talk about that specific guidance that has now been published in the INFF.org website, and to talk about the experiences of 3 SIDS in the region when it comes to implementing INFFs and when it comes to implementing some of the financing reforms to advance in sustainable development. Finally, also, I would also like to share with you that we are, well, the development partners are trying to come up with new ideas and new ways to assist SIDS in their endeavor to obtain or to achieve their SDGs and their development priorities. And one of those, is an initiative we launched last year called Financing for SIDS, short FINS, whereby we are proposing to deploy experts on sustainable development in each one of, or in SIDS countries, in order to work along the government officials for a long term, to help them to advance INFFs and the policy reforms to close the gaps in terms of sustainable development. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Resina Catafono. Resina works at UNDESA, at the Financing for Sustainable Development Office. She has led the work on international development cooperation that is included in the Financing for Sustainable Development report that is produced every year on the advancement of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. So Resina is going to talk about this work on the specific guidance on INFFs in SIDS. So Resina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. I have some slides. Can put it on, please? Okay, great. So before I start my presentation, and I know we've been talking about INFF since yesterday, can I just get a show of hands of all those who are very familiar with the building blocks of INFF, the 4? Okay, great. So maybe a third of the room and the other 2/3. So no problem. So it's just to give me context while I'm presenting this, because as Natalia mentioned, our guidance, the INFF, there's global guidance, where we talk about 4 elements, the inception phase and 4 building blocks: assessment and diagnostics, financing strategy, governance and coordination, and monitoring and evaluation. So the deep dives in terms of focusing on INFF implementation in the different sectoral areas such as climate finance, agriculture, or with countries in special situations such as small island developing states and least developed countries, we try and see how we can contextualize the guidance to these specific circumstances. So for implementing INFFs in SIDS, in the inception phase, we recommend 4 things. The first is to understand absorptive capacity and ensure knowledge transfer. So what that means is that because small islands have very limited resources, and of course this can apply to any of the countries that we have here, it's important to understand, how much financing they can absorb, but also how much technical assistance that these limited human resources can absorb. And also while we design the INFFs, it's to ensure that there's knowledge transfer, because for SIDS and for many other countries, you have this fly-in, fly-out consultant, which is a very, perennial issue. So it's important to have this, right up front. The second is to ensure effective development cooperation. And why we focus on this on SIDS is because SIDS being small, even though they're small, they have many development partners on the ground, focusing on many areas, sometimes overlap, and sometimes not with the government's knowledge. So this in the inception phase is to understand both from the country or the officials that are working on INFF and the development partners, is to understand all the players in the space that you're trying to work on INFFs. The third is to be pragmatic, and here we're talking about trying to prioritize the focus areas and contextualize the area that you're trying to work on, whether it be bonds or whether it be more PFM processes, is to try and focus on things and maybe use the phased approach so that it can match the system in your country. Some processes or some financial instruments may be more sophisticated than what you need. So it's important to understand what works for your country. Then lastly is, and this applies to all countries, is to expect a lot of staff changes and many setbacks. And in the SIDS countries, you also have to deal with natural disasters, political crises, lots of things during your timeline that you're trying to implement INFFs will happen. So you need to be prepared. So you need to analyze the risks in preparing the preparation of the INFFs. So just in terms of the building blocks that I mentioned, so in the guidance puts the lens in 3 parts. And the first is to build on existing systems and strategies, 2, prioritize, and 3, to have a phased approach. And building on existing systems, this is one of the core, the bedrock of the INFFs. INFFs is not to set up a parallel system, it's to work within what the country has. So I'll just go over very quickly on the different building blocks and how we use these 3 elements in terms of implementing INFFs in SIDS. Next slide, please. So in terms of assessment and diagnostic, this is one of the building blocks. If we think of using existing systems and strategies, what this means is that problem analysis for many small island developing states and for many countries, officials know what the problem is. They've done a lot of analysis, a lot of agencies have helped them. So it's to make use of that existing analysis, both internally and done by your partners, but also to try and see what the gaps are and see where you can build on. And then in terms of prioritization, it's also to ask the question, whether the costing exercises, whether more analysis is needed to really see what the value add of all this assessment and diagnostics, whether it is needed for your ultimate objective. And for SIDS, one of the particular constraints is the lack of data and statistics. And I mean, this morning we heard of the IMF tool, SDG Fit, and I just scanned quickly, and none of our countries up here feature in the tool. And one of the reasons is because of the lack of data and statistics that are needed at that granular level for such sophisticated tools. So it's important to always, ask that question. Not to say that we don't have to have that ambition, you can have that ambition, but to possibly try and achieve it through a phased approach, to try and tackle what you can, in a sort of piecemeal, structured way. Next slide, please. So in terms of the financing strategy, again, we're looking at the lens, what are the existing processes? So this morning and yesterday we heard of many of the country examples of their ongoing plans, their budget processes. They have many system strategies, sectoral plans. They're all in place. The INFF works at building on those existing plans and strategies. It's not about constructing something parallel. And so the center point of building on existing systems is the PFM process, because then within that system, within the governments, you have their budget planning, right through coordination, right through M&E. So it's to build on those existing systems, again, looking at prioritization, thinking about macro coherence checks. And what this means in a financing strategies is, yesterday we looked at all the different innovative bond instruments, blue, green, orange. The question also needs to be asked is that it's not the pursuit of just the innovation, but how this links to your debt sustainability analysis, how this links to your broader macroeconomic objectives, how that links to your social objectives, environmental issues, to consider that all cohesively, and the INFF helps you to do that. Next slide, please. So the next is on governance and coordination, and here again one of the critical factors now we're moving more in terms of how you implement that financing strategy. And this particular one is important, is on the existing institutions, how they coordinate within government, among ministries, with your development partners, with your civil society and other actors, with the private sector. And looking at, what are the binding constraints, what are the processes that need to be strengthened so that, sometimes policy obstacles are just generally due to personality issues that ministries are not talking together. We heard about trying to get line ministries to adopt what a central ministry is trying to do. So the INFF tries to help in this area in terms of advising officials on how they can do this. And for SIDS, again, to prioritize what could work best and look at a phased approach. Then lastly, on the last building block, next slide, please. We have on monitoring and review. So again, building on existing systems means that for all governments, you have an M&E system at the sector, at the division level, at the national level, is to ensure to use this existing process when you think of your INFF. Some countries have more sophisticated processes than others. Doesn't mean that for SIDS you need to do that. Is to again work on a phased approach. I mean, we heard about Philippines example this morning, which seems quite advanced, where some smaller island developing states may not have that granular detail, or even detail to have sort of climate tagging for their budgets. So we can work on a phased approach to tackle what is needed immediately and then sort of expand as you move out. And I just want to make one point on these building blocks, is that the INF, the idea behind it is it doesn't have to be sequential. It's flexible and you can work on which makes sense for you the most. So if the governance and coordination is the issue for that particular focus of financing area that you're looking at, you should go ahead and tackle that first. Then lastly, next slide please, is my last slide, is we have a tip. Next slide please. So the tip is a tip for practitioners. So basically at an individual level, what the INFF means. So this tip is, if you ask yourself, T, what is the task that you're looking at? How does that relate to that PFM process? And, you know, what part of the building block are you looking at? Are you talking about assessment? Are you talking about financing strategy, governance, M&E? So that's the T of the tip. The I is to first identify your existing processes, try and think about integration. If you're looking at an economic issue, how does that affect the social? How does that affect the environmental implication? You know, what are the political security issues at play? And then you have a what if. The what if is a risk building scenario in terms of thinking of the task that you have in front of you. Then the P is to think about your partners. Partners, you know, who needs to be, or who is working in this area already, who needs to be involved, and processes. What's the existing processes, what needs to be developed, you know, what needs to be created anew, and then lastly is on prioritization. So this is just a simple tip, again, at a very individual, practical level that you can think of the INFF, and I'll end my presentation there. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you, Rosina, and thank you for walking us through, well, these additional guidance that intends to, well, focus on SIDS, taking into account their particularities and try to provide with useful tips, useful advice on how to advance in a process that is in itself complex, long, and can be burdensome. So I will go to my first panelist, and well, we changed a little bit the order of their interventions. So I will go first to Mr. William Pamata from Samoa. William is Senior Research Officer at the Ministry of Finance in Samoa, and providing technical advice to his government on how to advance in the development priorities and the development agenda of the country. And so William is going to talk us about the INFF process in Samoa. Samoa, well, has undergone two processes of assessment. So the country has two development finance assessments already issued, and so William is going to talk us about what the country is currently doing in terms of INFFs. But I would also ask William to talk a little bit about partner coordination in the country. Samoa is famous for trying to have the development agencies and the IFIs that work in the country coordinated and to have them coordinating the processes with the government very closely. So William, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalia. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you for this great opportunity. Be here to share some of the experience from our country. And I have a slide, quick presentation just to highlight some of the aspects that what Natalia's mentioned. First of all, next please. The outline of our presentation, I will talk about the national planning framework and also the alignment of the SDGs to PDS as in relation to what the coordination between the government and SDG financing mechanisms. And also talk about a little bit on the financing strategy as mentioned by Rosina earlier, and the issues and challenges that were faced by our country in the past 2 to 5 years. Next. Okay, as you can see, this slide, the outlining of our national planning framework. As you may be aware that we have the national plans. It's called the Pathway for the Development of Samoa, and these plans are outlining 5 KSO, key strategic outcomes, with 21 key priority areas. As I mentioned this one because this is reflected how the sector-wide approach, which brings all the stakeholders and the budget process, including government and development partners. And also the budget directly linked to all the ministries' corporate plans, structured with the performance based on their framework, the MTEF, medium-term expenditure framework, and also link it to sector plans and outlining the priorities set in the national plan. Yes, no, go back, please. Yes, the far left, the SDGs, and also the Samoa 2040 over the 20 years. So we also strengthen this relationship of the targets and objectives that we set in the national plan in order to achieve by this long-term plan, the Samoa 2040, and also the linkage, the SDG to our PDS, just to ensure the SDG implementation is contextualized and is part of the overall national planning, budgeting and accountability process. Yes, I'm talking about a little bit coordination between the government and development partners. As you may be aware that we have a committee, the high-level committee that is called the Cabinet Development Committee. So that committee plays a role of how to assess and review all the developments. I'm talking about investment on behalf of our government. So this committee review, assess all the developments projects, and then when it comes to the approval of our annual budget every year, and then we formalize our PSIP, our public sector investment program. So that's plan incorporated all the projects or the ongoing and pipeline projects that fit to the annual budget where the financing options came in. So when, for example, when the developments approved by this committee, the new projects came in. So the government step in if the project's below 100 threshold. And if it's above the 100 threshold, then we seek the donor funding or the development partners. So in linkage to SDG financing, we had financed some of our sector plan in the past 2 to 3 weeks under the SDG financing. So we work collaboratively with our SDG counterparts in Samoa and also our development partners with our roundtable with donor partners mainly occur and happen in every year, the beginning of February to March before our annual budget table in the parliament. In terms of the financing strategy, I would like to highlight some of the main points that are linked to our SDG financing. So here we have a national planning framework. Also, we have policies within each sectors, respective sectors. So for implementing of these policies by sector planning. So we all have, in terms of resourcing, lack of resourcing. So that's also the government needs to strengthen the work with each development partners through the Ministry of Finance and the Aid Coordination Committee. That's the roundtable donor discuss how financing reach developments. In terms of INFF, as Regina mentioned earlier, yeah, I think this is one of the main important framework that will lead to our government or our country just to foresee whether this is the kind or the tools that we try to implement and integrate it into not only our national planning development priorities, but we foresee like in future like it is works, because like we have a fiscal strategy. That's all the components of economy that we review and publish every financial year. So tax reform, debt to GDP, all the economic components. So it links to this guiding or the tools. So hopefully we will mandate and we'll see these tools will help, very helpful and work to all our aspects towards the end of our national development plans. That's from our end. Thank you.
Thank you, William, for for your presentation, and I think it touched upon a lot of important issues. We want to stress when we talk about INFFs. One is this link between your development plan and your development system, really, and the financing policies. And the other one that is very, very important, especially when we are talking about SIDS, is this coordination within the country and the coordination among development partners, because one of the or with development partners and development agencies. One of the things that usually happen, especially when, or right now, when SIDS have been prioritized by, all development agencies, is that we overwhelm the government when we come with new proposals, new ideas, etc. And instead of helping out, we are increasing the problem. So Samoa's experience is a really interesting one, and it feels like you are in charge of the agenda and you are really in the driving seat. So that is a very important experience to share with other seats and other countries and with the development agencies, actually. With that, I would now pass the floor to Andrew Koroi, who's the National Development and who works in the National Development and Statistics Department in the Strategic Planning of the Ministry of Finance in Fiji. And Andrew is going to talk us about one specific finance policy measure you have been working on, which is the blue bonds. As we mentioned at the very beginning, SIDS face a lot of challenges due to their particular situation. One of them is the small landmass, but SIDS probably are in an advantage when it comes to the sea resources, and so that's why blue bonds have come to play an important role when it comes to financing policy measures. So Andrew, who's also coordinating the work for Fiji on the upcoming voluntary national review that is going to be presented in 2023, is going to talk us about the blue bonds and your experience with or issuing a framework for issuing blue bonds. So Andrew, please.
Yeah, thank you. For having me, also thank for me as a panelist again for today. In response to the question, I also have a slide. I can just step the slide up. Fiji's inclusive economic zone is 75 larger than its landmass, and it is the 26th largest sovereign ocean space in the world. It is home to 3.5% of the global coral reefs and over 65,000 hectares of mangroves. With 75% of the population that living within 5 kilometers from the coast, and over 90% of the population that are near major waterways. So the Fijians have strong linkage to the ocean. Therefore, Fiji is now accelerating its blue economy ambitions to sustainably leverage its ocean-based resources. Can I have the next slide, please? From the regulatory standpoint, Fiji has over 48 legislations that guides over the Fiji's inclusive economic zone. Sometimes these legislations can be confusing, also overlapping, and generally too cumbersome to understand. To negate this issue, we have developed the Fiji National Ocean Policy, which sets the development agenda for Fiji. However, one of the things to have with policies is, however, the issue of having these policies securing the finances. And also actually mobilizing such policies. So that's those are one of the issues that we have come up with these national ocean policies. In this regard, Fiji is embarked on developing its blue bond to help operationalize its national ocean policy and unlock the development potential of its blue economy. The steps that has been involved in developing this bond after COP26 going in the year 2022 with a blank slate, and need to clearly map out a step-by-step process to structure Fiji's first ever sovereign blue bond issuance. We began to identify several eligible projects that could be financed by the blue bond and commence detailed elimination process that was guided by a robust criteria such as the urgency of the project, the financial outlay needed, and also the time needed to complete this project. So with the support of UNDP and also other multilateral partners such as the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, the Fiji government commenced detailed techno-economical feasibility studies for the shortlisted projects that range from the nature-based coastal protection solutions to the introduction of hybrid electric vessels to decarbonize Fiji's maritime transport sector. The Fiji Blue Bond issuance is expected to be divided into two tranches. Tranche 1 is the year 2023 to 2024, and tranche 2 in 2024 to 2025 financial year. We hope to have tranche 1 officially announced in the Fiji's upcoming national budget, which is the end of this month, and to float the bond in the market in the month of September. Can I step to the next slide? Yes, no. So as you can see on the screen, we have the Tranche 1, which has two key projects. One is the nature-based solution for coastal protection for at least 15 low-lying vulnerable coastal communities, and the scaling up of Fiji's aquaculture sector by focusing on the state-of-the-art national breeding programs and also the program for 3 species that include beach dema, black tiger fish, water prawns, and orange spotted grouper fish. Can I have the next slide, please, for Tranche 2? Okay, so on the screen you have Tranche 2. This will be the large projects. Will consist of introducing the hybrid electric ships, scale public-private partnership in aquaculture, extending to other species, also establishing a dedicated lending facility for blue projects with banks in Fiji, and developing Fiji's second only landfill that will cover the western part of Fiji, as I've explained in yesterday's presentation. In terms of the sustainable bond framework, for the past 18 months, we have done a lot, and a lot of work has been done with our partners to develop the blue bond. And as you can see on the slide, the process that I've explained is from 2 to 5. But for the process 1, instead of Fiji developing a framework specific to blue bond, we have developed an all-encompassing sustainable bond framework that allows the Fiji government to clearly define its capital market operations and leverage new and additional funding for its sustainable development. Just some of the challenges that has been faced along the way, apart from the comprehensive efforts to actually identify and develop suitable eligible projects to be funded by the thematic bond issuance such as blue bond. We've identified 4 challenges that I want to highlight today. One is creating a business case. 2, reducing cost of accessing finance. 3 is overcoming market unfamiliarity. And lastly, establishing the robust monitoring and evaluation capacity. So overall, Fiji has been doing a lot, and we are helping ourselves, but we also need everyone's help to build on the momentum that Fiji has done for the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that very interesting presentation and to walk us through how and the priorities you set when you started to think about the issuance of the blue bond, taking into account your particular also circumstances and also to walk us through the process you are in order to structure and issuing the bond, which again is one example of a policy measure in order to advance in achieving some of the development priorities you set for your country. And now I will turn to Mr. Carlos Lopez Jimenez. Mr. Lopez Jimenez is the General Director of Industry at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of Timor-Leste. Currently, he's in charge of the policies related to or for promoting industry in the country and for promoting diversification in the country, but he's also an expert on fisheries and environment, as far as I understand. we would like you to walk us through another set of policy measures related or for achieving sustainable development, which are industrial policies. Now we are again talking about industrial policies and how, well, what are the policies Timor-Leste is advancing in that particular area. So over to you, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for moderating this section. It's indeed a great pleasure for me for this international gathering. As my friends already before me already mentioned some part of Timor-Leste development in tax aspects. Apology for my presentation. It is merely a country case of how Timor-Leste can develop or let's say can diversify its economy. You might have known that Timor-Leste is a tiny half island, small island country bordered with eastern part of Indonesia, Nusa Tenggara Timur, what they call in Indonesia. Now becoming independent since 2002, and it has a lot of problem since its independence with a lack of human resource, lack of institutional capability to actually afford, all of these are challenges that actually Timor-Leste faces before. And then my presentation will be actually focused on how Timor-Leste can diversify its economy during since the start of pandemic. We actually focus on this program. It was done before COVID. I mean during COVID and post-COVID. With if you might, you can show the slide of economic recovery. This is a simple showing that is the point that I'll be talking on. Next, please, the other slide with the picture. This one. Well, we have got since 2021. The pandemic affect our country, the economic, job losses, and then others. So really affect the Timor-Leste economy. So we start with economic recovery plan with short measures, which was well done with providing food basket containing local products. Those products that are not produced in Timor-Leste are imports. We can use it for distributed to citizens. All citizens of Timor-Leste is about 1.3 million have to receive all these food items, food basket. For the ordinary citizen to a president, they all have the right to receive the food basket containing local products. And also we had like a subsidy to local informal workers, and also a subsidy for companies to not firing the workers during pandemic. Because it will affect pretty much on the daily life. There will be no food. Basically, it's very hard for normal citizens that have no ability to afford food for daily life. And for this measure continue until now, we have the second. The first phase was with the state budget. We spent about 71 million for purchasing local products, I have said before. And the second phase was 80 million. It's ongoing until now, until the last one was concluded on 15th of June. And this is short measures. And the medium and long measures, we came up with a program like MSMS, Business Incubation, Business Innovation Challenge, People Shop, we call in Portuguese is Loja do Povo. I'm very good in Portuguese anyway. And then all of this with the medium and long-term measures. Well, I'm going to talk about the MSMEs. As many developing countries, I guess MSMEs is somehow it's very good to start developing a country economy. If you agree with me. And then we started with MSMEs. In 2020, with the close cooperation with UNDP, we did this program, which we call social business soft loan. And also we work with the Commercial Bank of Timor-Leste, BNCTL. Also with the Institute of Business Support. These are the institutions that are, in collaboration with UNDP, we start with this program. We establish a guarantee, loan guarantee, collateral, with just 3% annual per annum. And with how can you say? So we give 3% annual. At the time, you also consult with other commercial bank, even a bank from Indonesia, bank from Australia, New Zealand bank, and also Portuguese bank. We consult with if they have the chance to also carry out this program. I mean, can also offer. But they just told us that, okay, we are going to talk with our headquarters to see how can you accept this. And it seems like very hard for the bank to accept this interest rate of 3% per annum. And because the commercial bank is the state bank, so we actually accept this 3%. And now we have got like a deposit for bank guarantee. Before was 1.3 million. We deposit for especially for micro, small, medium enterprises to can borrow the amount of 1,000 to 25,000. With the decree law being promulgated by the President of the Republic at the time. And then the big companies start talking. How come this soft loan is just 25,000 is nothing for us, like big companies like ours. Can we have more than this? And then just in 3 months, the government amended this decree law. The decree law is number 8, 2022, and it's amended with decree law 33, 2022, to put in more funds to 50 million. And now it is in the bank, being deposited at the bank. And now about 47 companies having access to these funds. You still have a lot of funds, waiting at the bank. And those who were actually criticizing, because the criteria it seems like too hard for some companies, because they say that the criteria is too complicated, blah, blah, and this. Anyway, because of this time constraint, I will probably go further. And this is the soft loan. We have got also business incubation center. Now we establish a center for incubation for business startup and existing, for capacity building, business capacity building, for youth that had innovation, potentiality, and also have ideas to how to develop the business. And we have got also the business innovation challenge, which is very good for youth entrepreneurs. That across the country we identify groups and or individuals who has the idea to do business, and we select them, and we allow them to compete, and then we identify the best, and then we select them to compete, and the best will be awarded with the package of equipment. In this case, we just give them equipment, not funds, not money, but just equipment, so that they can expand their business. And then if we find them that they are not complying with the requirement from the ministry, we'll take back the equipment and give it to the other groups. And we have got also the industrial park establishment. Now we finalize also the viability study. For attracting foreign direct investment and also job creation and also national investment. This is we allocate 23 million for the construction and 1.5 million for land indemnification. So those affected, people that are in the area of the proposed industrial park will be indemnities, and then they give them. This we have got also the decree law for that. And the last internal, regional and regional integration that we know in the states of ASEAN, we had conducted a virtual fact-finding meeting and for economic pillar and social cultural. So these two pillars. And then we had an in-person fact-finding meeting, and then realized in the third trimester. And also, I can stop in this? No problem.
Yes, Carlos, please. I'm sorry. We have to wrap up because we are behind. And
sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
no. And we will have the opportunity or you will have the opportunity to share more of your experiences in the marketplace. But thank you very much for sharing for sharing that and explaining the set of policies Timor-Leste has adopted on industrial or to diversify its industry. So with that, I think we have time for one question, I don't know, or probably a couple of questions. Yeah, I don't know if there are any, or over there, please. Thank you.
You are. Thank you very much. Luisa, UNDP Samoa. I just wanted to recognize Madam Moderator as well as our panelists for such a informative presentation. I also want to recognize young William here. He's probably the youngest in the room and is also a senior policy research officer that's driving policy reform changes in Samoa and the public finance sector. So Malo William. I just want to make 3 key points here, Natalia, and I think it's very important. I want to reiterate Racina's key points about building on existing systems. How do we take forward the INFF? It's important, and for Samoa's case here, having the Samoa pathway is definitely the entry point for taking this forward. It's integrating it into the government budget system and policy reforms that are currently, also very recently taking place, as William had also explained. We spoke about development partner coordination. That's very important because definitely Samoa, being very small, is also struggling with trying to bring our partners together. William had highlighted some of the existing mechanisms that brings everyone together. Even high-level engagement, where we have the Cabinet Development Committee. We also have the Aid Coordination Committee, where UNDP, fortunately, also sits in those committees. I want to also, the third point I wanted to make here is where to from here, just some of the thoughts here, and given that Samoa has done 2 assessments, one in 2018 and then very recently 2022, supported by UNDP with government, with our other partners. I think there's 3 way forward here that's suggested in this assessment, and that's looking at blended financing. That's also looking at the disaster risk insurance. And then the other one is the investor map. So these are, and I think for Samoa, it's taking the phased approach. And I want to reiterate what Tim, I think it was Tim that had mentioned, or Chris, the challenge that he put out this morning what is the change? We have all these nice INFF, we have these policy reforms, but you know, for Samoa, we have to be quite realistic and also be able to implement within our absorptive capacity and be able to answer that multi-million-dollar question. What change has come about as a result of all of this that's gender transformative, that does no harm, and most of all, we articulate the principle of leave no one behind with the SDG financing mechanisms that is currently being talked about in the different conversations around the room. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for those comments and that intervention. I think you have well contributed to summarize very well what we intend to convey when talking about INFFs in SIDS. So there is another comment question over there.
Thank you. Frederick from UNDP Timor-Leste. I just wanted to ask to William, I mean, your national planning framework is a very good example for us. So Timor-Leste is now have an integrated national financing framework for the development. We have a policy summary to the government, but we have facing so many challenges to incorporate in our PFM secretariat under the PFM process, the INFF secretariat to the PFM process. So can you briefly giving us example or some ingredients so that can helping us to establish those things in the government system? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. First of all, as mentioned by one of our colleagues from Samoa, UNDP Samoa, that's yes, we had our legal framework like the PFM. Also, we incorporated everything in our national planning framework. That's mandated by our PFM Act. So yes, for integrating the financial framework into our national planning framework. So yet not in place the INFF into our national planning framework, but which it's something we need to foresee for our thriving national priorities counterparts with some of our expertise in development. Can Rhonda, can you please add more for the PFM, please?
Hi, so this is Rhonda from Ministry of Finance in Samoa, and I work in the area of our PFM reforms. With this question is, so for Samoa we already have our PFM Act, and that's where our PFM system is, but the INFF will feed into the existing systems that we already have, incorporating into our national planning framework. But we also have our sector plans. We also have our sector planning manuals that feed into the ministry level. So it's kind of like a tier where you can incorporate into the sector or on the ministry, and then at the national planning framework level. Hopefully this answers the question, but for us it's not only the INFF, we also have other assessments that we already conducted. For example, there's the PEFA CC, incorporating the gender, but just having the base there for the PFM, so it's just seeing where the gaps are at and then trying and incorporating into the existing systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I don't know if there are some other questions or comments. Here.
My name is Sarvash. I'm from the Maldives. My question is for Fiji and to UNDESA. So one thing is, we saw that from your blue bond issuance on the second tranche, there are many IFIs involved, ADB, World Bank. Yesterday, Indonesian delegation, they mentioned that the greeniums didn't really help. There is no pricing advantage there. I'm wondering if there is a pricing advantage when IFIs are involved, and whether the interest or coupon rate is lower for the second tranche, or whether there is that trend going forward. And for DESA, my question is, how can IFIs bring down that interest or coupon rate? How can you contribute to that? I think this is important because in times of limited fiscal space, especially for SIDS, having high coupon rates for blue, green, or any other colored bond is not necessarily helping, because it just adds more cost for compliance. A conventional bond would as well give the same rate. If you can get the subscription, you may as well go with the conventional bond. There is nothing, no additional advantage going for green or blue bond. But we would like to tap into that market space, but at the same time, get some kind of an advantage in terms of pricing as well. So how can IFIs help in that respect? So 2 questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If you don't mind, I want to hand over the mic to our other team member from Fiji, Vinil, who's also at the back, to answer your question. Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you for that question. Very interesting one, and something that we were grappling with in Fiji as well, was to be able to really differentiate and really help the Fijian government understand what's the difference between a thematic bond issuance like blue, green, orange, etc., versus a normal vanilla bond issuance. And so the idea, the intention was to be able to firstly understand where will the bonds be issued. If the bonds are going to be issued internationally, then working with IFIs to come up with some sort of a credit rep, a credit guarantee support, which in particular the Asian Development Bank does provide, generally tends to help with the coupon rates as per se. But Fiji is in a peculiar situation. Our domestic liquidity is at an all-time high due to various reasons, standing at around 2.3 billion Fijian dollars. That's about half of that is US dollars. And the idea is to be able to tap into the domestic financial market. And so what we're now grappling with is the fact that those credit reps that are being offered by the IFIs really will not make much of a difference when it comes to domestic bond issuances. So just over tea this morning, we were thinking about how we would be able to use some of the tools that are being offered by the hub here, the finance hub here, in terms of bringing out the impact advantages and the impact potential of issuing a thematic bond as compared to a normal bond, and to be able to see if that attracts a certain level of investors who would look at taking on lower interest rates in exchange for higher impact. And so the idea is to be able to find investors that would be looking at niche investments particularly per se, rather than large-scale returns. I would be happy to discuss this even more if you want to. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think Vinil answered a lot of the questions you had also for me in terms of what the role of IFI. But I think one critical point that he also touched on is the need to compare the different instruments that you're looking at, because there are always transaction costs in getting into these things, and whether overall that will make sense to go one way versus the other. So I think it's important to compare the different options that countries have. And IFIs can help with that in terms of that technical knowledge to provide in terms of the technical assistance for that. So, and with that, I'll pass over back to you, Natalia.
Thank you. And well, with that, I think we come to a conclusion. I would like to thank the panelists for sharing their experiences. And as you could see, well, well, the SIDS face particular challenges, and as Rosina was mentioning her last intervention, well, countries need to be aware of what is their situation and what is available for them. There is no one solution that fits all, and in this case, that is well, particularly true. So with that, I would like to again thank the panelists and invite you to give them a big applause. And I think, and pass to Tim.